On a lonely stretch of highway deep in the frozen northern wilderness, two tiny grizzly bear cubs were left to perish. No food, no shelter. Just a ditch beside a road where cars flew past, unaware. They were too small to protect themselves, too frightened to cry for help. And the man who dumped them? He thought no one would ever find them. But what he didn't know, couldn't have known, was that someone had seen. A stranger, an ordinary man haunted by loss, was about to make a decision that would change everything. This is a story of cruelty, survival, and a single act of courage that will stay with you long after it ends. What happens next will stay in your heart. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. The wind screamed across the highway, whipping snow in jagged spirals through the emptiness of northern Montana. The air stung with cold, the earth locked in frost. On most days, nothing unusual ever happened here, just miles of road carving through silence. But today, something was different. In the narrow ditch that ran beside the road, two small figures lay motionless, their fur caked with ice and dirt, barely shifted with their breath. Bear cubs, grizzly by the look of them, only months old, alone, afraid, left behind like garbage by a man who didn't care if they lived or died. Maybe he raised them illegally. Maybe they'd become too much. No one knew. No one saw him leave. But one thing he hadn't counted on, someone had been watching. A little farther up the road, Ben Holloway, 58, retired mechanic, was resting in his rusted-out pickup truck. He'd stopped to nap after fixing a neighbor's busted generator. Life had slowed since his wife passed. It was just him, his dog Cody, and long drives on empty roads. He'd only closed his eyes for a minute when he heard it. A car skidding to a stop. A door slammed. Silence followed. Ben blinked awake just in time to see a dark SUV peeling away. Odd. Why stop here? Curiosity tugged at him. He started the truck, eased onto the shoulder, and stepped out into the cold. That's when he spotted them. At first, he thought they were strays, dogs maybe, but when he got closer, his chest tightened. Two tiny grizzly cubs, barely alive, curled against each other in the snow. Ben froze. Born and raised in Montana, he respected what grizzlies could do, but these weren't threats. These were babies, weak, starving, dying. His mind screamed a call for help. But something older, deeper, stirred. A voice he hadn't heard in years, his wife's, soft and certain. Do what's right, not what's easy. And just like that, Ben knew he couldn't walk away. Chapter 2, A Choice in the Snow. Ben crouched in the snow, staring down at the cubs, his breath fogging the frigid air. They didn't flinch at his presence. No growls, no fear. Just exhaustion. One cub had a gash on its paw, the other barely kept its eyes open. Both were slipping fast. Ben's hands hovered, unsure. He scanned the tree line, half expecting a mother bear to crash through. But the woods were dead quiet. He understood what that meant. They'd truly been abandoned. His mind raced. Should he call Fish and Wildlife? But what if they came too late? Or worse, decided the cubs were too sick to save? He couldn't let that happen. He had to act. Now Ben turned and jogged to his truck. Cody lifted his head, ears flicking. Easy, boy, Ben murmured, grabbing an emergency blanket and a half-full thermos. It wasn't much, but it was something. Back at the ditch, he wrapped the cubs as gently as he could. They barely stirred. He poured a little coffee into the thermos lid, held it near their noses. The stronger one licked it once. The other didn't move. Ben's throat tightened. This is insane, he whispered. I'm no vet. He knew he wasn't supposed to handle wild animals. But something inside refused to back down. Something that had slept since Elaine died. She'd been the one with the big heart, the rescuer, the believer. He'd always teased her for it. Now her voice was louder than the wind. Do what's right, not what's easy. He picked them up, awkward but careful, and laid them in the truck bed. Cody sniffed once, then curled beside them, calm and quiet. Ben started the engine. The heater groaned. He pulled onto the road, hands steady, heart racing. He didn't know where to go, only that he had to keep them alive long enough to find a way. The drive felt like it would never end. Ben's hands clenched the wheel, eyes flicking between the icy road ahead and the cubs in the mirror. They lay huddled under the blanket, still barely moving. Cody watched them, lifting his head now and then to check before settling back down. The heater was on full, but Ben couldn't shake the cold in his chest. He had no plan. He just knew they couldn't stay in the truck. Not like this. Not for long. The nearest ranger post was over 40 miles away. And even if he made it, what then? Would they take the cubs in or put them down? He couldn't risk it. Not yet. Instead, he veered off onto a narrow service road, almost hidden by pines. It led to a place he hadn't visited in nearly 2 years. His father's old hunting cabin. Nothing fancy. Just one room, a fireplace, a cot, and some supplies. But it was warm, safe, isolated. Maybe enough to keep them alive. 20 minutes later, the truck rolled into the clearing. Snow clung to the roof and windows. The trees groaned in the wind. Ben stepped out, opened the back door. One cub blinked, weak but conscious. The other didn't move. His heart clenched. He lifted them both, arms straining, but he cradled them like glass. Cody trailed behind as they stepped inside. The cabin was cold, dark, but still intact. Ben laid the cubs on towels near the fireplace, then went to work. He chopped wood the way his father had taught him, built a fire, fed it slowly until the first glow lit the room. Warmth crept in. Cody curled close to the cubs, sharing body heat. Ben found powdered milk and a bit of honey in the old pantry. It wasn't ideal, but it was all he had. He warmed water, mixed it gently, soaked a clean rag and pressed it to the stronger cub's lips. It licked, swallowed. Again, a flicker of hope. He turned to the weaker one, barely breathing, eyes shut tight. "Come on, little one," Ben whispered. No response, but he didn't stop. For hours he fed, warmed, talked, his voice low and steady. He told them about Elaine, about the cabin, promised he wouldn't leave, not now, not ever. The fire crackled, the cubs breathed, the hours stretched into dawn. Morning light spilled through frosted windows. The fire had burned low, but the room still held its warmth. Ben stirred in the armchair, his back stiff, neck sore. But his first thought wasn't about the pain, it was about them. He sat up fast. The stronger cub was curled against Cody, breathing easy. The other, Ben held his breath. It was awake, still frail, but blinking, shifting, alive. Ben dropped to his knees. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, barely daring to hope. He warmed the honey milk mix and fed them both again. This time they both responded. Weak, yes, but alive. A tear slipped down Ben's cheek. He hadn't cried since Elaine's funeral. Not once. But something about this fight for life cracked him open. Then, just as hope took root, a sound shattered the calm. Tires. Ben froze. No one should be out here. Not in winter. Not this deep. He rushed to the window. A white pickup idled at the edge of the clearing. 2 men climbed out, both in camouflage. One held a rifle. Ben's stomach turned. Poachers? Or worse, someone searching for the cubs. He moved fast, dimming the firelight, shielding the cubs. Cody growled low. Ben cracked the door, stepped outside. "Morning," one of the men called, smiling too wide. "Didn't think anyone else would be up here this time of year." Ben gave a calm nod, his voice even. "Just keeping the place from falling apart." The man's gaze sharpened, suspicion flickering. "You up here by yourself?" Ben nodded again. The men's eyes shifted past him, toward the cabin. "Funny," the second one muttered. "Heard something come over the radio. Report of bear cubs dumped near the highway. Word is someone stopped and picked them up." Ben's heart pounded like a drum. "I wouldn't know anything about that," he said, voice flat and unreadable. The man with the rifle stepped forward, eyes sweeping the tree line. "Mind if we take a look around?" Ben drew a long breath. "Yeah, I do." The silence that followed was sharp, tense. No one moved. Then Cody stepped up beside Ben, stiff-legged, a low growl rolling from deep in his chest. Ben didn't blink. After a long beat, the 2 men shared a glance. "We'll be on our way," the first one said at last. giving a curt nod. Stay warm. Hey, climbed back into their truck and drove off. Ben didn't move until the sound of the engine faded completely into the forest. Only then did he step back inside, shut the door, and kneel beside the cubs again. He had just lied to armed strangers to protect two wild animals, and he knew he'd do it again. It had been 4 days since Ben found them, and in that short time, the old cabin had become something close to a refuge. The fire never died. The cubs were eating more, moving more, their eyes brighter, more alert. Cody had taken to guarding them like they were his own, never straying far. But Ben was running on empty. His hands were cracked and raw from chopping firewood. He was almost out of powdered milk and honey, and the storm that had been forecast days ago, it had arrived in full force, burying the truck in snow and cutting off the only road in. He was stranded, and time was running out. That morning, as the wind screamed outside and the fire burned low, Ben sat near the cubs, watching the flames. Fear twisted in his chest, not fear of the bears, not of the blizzard, but of what came after. He had grown attached, more than he'd planned, more than he should have. When he looked at them now, he didn't see wildlife. He saw something else, a second chance, a way to matter again, a reason to care. But deep down he knew this wasn't permanent. It couldn't be. They were growing stronger, sure, but they were still wild. They needed space, protection, a future, and Ben couldn't give them that. Not here, not like this. He had to make a choice. Slowly he rose to his feet, walked to the table, and picked up the old two-way radio. It barely worked since the storm hit, but now and then it still crackled with static. His fingers hovered over the button that would send a call to the wildlife service. He didn't press it. Instead, he turned to the cubs, one asleep, the other tugging on a worn bootlace with innocent curiosity. They were alive because of him, and if he let them go, he might never see them again. Suddenly, Cody growled, a low, sharp warning. Ben spun around, startled. Through the frost-streaked window, he saw movement, a shape, not human, a bear, an adult grizzly. His blood ran cold. Could it be their mother? He crept toward the glass, eyes locked on the figure moving at the edge of the trees. She was huge, cautious, watchful. She didn't come closer, just paced along the tree line, powerful and deliberate. Her head turned, her nose lifted. She was scenting the air, listening. She knew. Somehow she knew her cubs were inside. Ben's chest tightened. What was he supposed to do? Would she charge? Wait? Leave? He glanced back at the cubs, and in that moment, he understood. They didn't just need him anymore. She needed them too. But if he opened that door, if he let them go, it might shatter him. Doing the right thing now meant doing the one thing he wasn't sure he could survive, letting them go. Ben stood at the door, unmoving. Outside, the blizzard had eased just enough to make out her silhouette through the swirling snow. She didn't growl. She didn't threaten. She just kept pacing, occasionally stopping to sniff the wind, always turning her head back toward the cabin. She knew. Ben had never felt so torn. He looked over his shoulder one more time. One cub slept, curled tight. The other was chewing on a rag, blinking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. That trust nearly broke him. They no longer feared him. They had let him into their tiny world. And now he had to let them go. Slowly his hand reached for the latch. His heart pounded. Was this madness? Was he about to invite death through the front door? Everything he knew about grizzlies told him no. But somewhere deeper, older, something whispered, yes. Ben turned the latch and eased the door open. The cold wind surged in, cutting through the warmth like a blade. Across the clearing, the mother bear froze. Their eyes met, man and beast, protector and mother, both weary, both afraid, both doing what they must to protect the vulnerable. Ben didn't speak. He didn't gesture. He simply stepped aside, opening the space between them, a quiet offering or perhaps a final surrender. Then she moved, not fast, not reckless. Each step was steady, powerful, full of purpose. Her breath steamed in the frozen air as she crossed the clearing. At the threshold, she paused, her nose lifted. She inhaled the scent of fire, man, and something more. Familiar, sacred. Then she looked past him. The cubs had noticed. The stronger one rose, wobbling on unsteady paws, and let out a soft, broken sound. Not a roar, not a whimper, but something older. A cry, a call. The mother answered with a low, resonant rumble that made the floorboards tremble, a sound no human could mimic, a sound that said, "I'm here," a sound that said, "Home." Ben stepped farther back. She entered. She didn't spare him a glance. Her world was only her cubs now. She sniffed them, nudged them, checked every inch. One licked her muzzle. The other crawled onto her massive paw and collapsed into her warmth. It was done. She had come. She had found them. Ben wiped his eyes, surprised to find them wet. He stepped outside, the door still open behind him. He didn't know how long she would stay. Minutes, hours, maybe until the sun rose. But it didn't matter. He had done what he came to do. He had kept them alive. Now it was her turn. The sun began its slow rise over the trees, casting golden shafts of light across the snow. The wind had stilled. The forest, wrapped in silence, seemed to watch. Ben stood outside the cabin, arms crossed against the cold, breath fogging the crisp air. His back ached. His fingers stung. But he couldn't go back inside. Not yet. Hours had passed. No growls, no movement. Only the steady crackle of the fire, and now and then, the soft breaths of cubs nestled in their mother's fur. And then, she appeared. The grizzly mother stepped into the doorway, filling it with her presence. She paused. Her breath was heavy. Her eyes met Ben's. Just for a moment. There was no threat in them, no fear, just something simple, profound, a quiet acknowledgement, a mother recognizing the man who kept her cubs safe. Ben stayed still. He didn't have to move. She already knew. Behind her, the cubs tumbled out, clumsy in the snow, pressing close to her sides. One glanced back, just once, before nudging its sibling and following their mother into the forest. They didn't hurry. They didn't look back again. They simply went. Together. Ben watched until the last flick of her tail vanished into the pines. And then they were gone. Gone like a dream that stays just long enough to prove it was real. He turned and stepped back into the cabin. The room felt different now. Not just quieter, but emptier, like something more than the cubs had left. He stood for a long moment, staring at the blankets, the dented feeding bowl, the low, flickering fire. Cody sat nearby, ears low, watching in silence, as if he understood too. Ben knelt down, running a hand through the dog's fur. "We did good, boy," he whispered. "We did real good." He didn't cry, not this time. Not because it didn't ache, but because it meant something. For the first time since Elaine's passing, Ben felt part of something greater than himself. Something true. Something that mattered. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, catching the ice-laced trees and spilling a little warmth into the clearing. Ben glanced out toward the woods one last time and smiled. Sometimes the right thing isn't easy. It isn't safe. It doesn't ask permission, but it matters. This story wasn't just about survival. It was about compassion, about courage, about the quiet, powerful bond that can form between two very different worlds. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who still believes in doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Because kindness once given leaves tracks that never fade.